It's still May 20th, 2013, and I had a comment today, some of you may have seen it, from a gentleman who asked me to talk about this DOD plan to react to civil unrest without the president's approval. And I was planning on doing that anyway. I was going to do a whole separate video on it, and that's kind of what this is, but then I realized most of what I talk about probably be too complicated to really get into a lot of the nitty-gritty, so I'm kind of covering it this way, and I hope that's all right. You can get this document, okay? You can go on the federal sites, you can go on, like InfoWars has it in a PDF, and you can download it and read it all yourself. It's basically DOD instruction number 3025.21, dated February 27th, 2013. Let me give you a little background again, okay? Okay, I've mentioned just to you once before that I was a military police officer. That was my primary. And in MP work, we are very much involved with civil disturbance operations. So I had training in that, operations of all types in civil disturbance, including on the ground forces to quell a civil disturbance using military formations, riot formations. Also psychological and all those other things. Well, that was at the beginning of my military career. Later on, I went through, as I've also mentioned to you, the U.S. Army Terrorism Counteraction Course. Now, why would I bring that up with this? Because the definitions, even in 1988, were expanding outside of basic criminality. Okay, basically they were talking about people who even had the ability to be a dissent against the government, just in political terms, political dissidents, not even necessarily acting, but just because they would fit into a definition. And now, without me even going into all of those, you can see how that's developed now. It's real obvious. They'll call, somebody who's paying their people with with gold coins that they're, economic terrorists. I mean, there's no end to the way this thing is going. Or the Christians are terrorists, or the conservatives are terrorists, domestic terrorists, returning veterans. I think you get my point. But those are just specific peoples. They also have actual definitions that have nothing to do with terroristic behavior, but they call it terroristic. Okay. Well, I learned that when I went through the Army counterterrorism course. Then subsequent to that, later on, oh, by the way, and I was a garden plot commander. It's another one of those operations that they do for civil disturbances. So I was involved in the garden plot mission, okay, which is about civil disturbance operations. Later on, I actually took an entire course on civil disturbance operations, okay? So how does all this link together? Well, with those definitions from the Terrorism Counteraction course, okay, combined with civil disturbances, you can see where I can put these two problems together and how it's going to affect citizens in the United States. So I read through this document, DOD instruction number 3025.21, and a lot of it's pretty much run-of-the-mill civil disturbance stuff that's been around for a long time. Contingency plans, things like that. But there were some specific differences, and this is where I want to go with this. Military authority in the United States historically has never been permitted to operate outside of or without being underneath some civil authority. And I don't mean the Secretary of Defense, okay? In the Constitution, you have the President. If he's not available, who does it fall to? The Vice President. If he's not available, who does it fall to? The Speaker of the House. And then it goes on down from there through the Cabinet, okay? So there should always be somebody in the civilian side of the house that the military is answering to. If they do not, they are acting outside of constitutional authority. Now, we could argue back and forth on that on constitutional grounds. Stuart Rhodes would be really good to go through with this. But this is what I want to point out. Okay, on page, if you go ahead and download that PDF and you go to page 16, okay, this is what you're going to find. I want to show it to you. As you can see here, I do have the entire document on my computer, But where I'm going to take you is to this location here. Okay, and this is very important. I want you to see this under this paragraph 3 that's right in front of you here on this page. And again, I could go through this whole thing, but this is where I think the really problematical part is. It says here, when permitted under emergency authority in accordance with reference C, federal military commanders have the authority in extraordinary emergency circumstances where prior authorization by the president is impossible and duly constituted local authorities are unable to control the situation. Okay? But look what it says down here. We're going to go to right here, where that B is. Let me read this to you. When duly constituted federal, state, and local authorities are unable or, what does that say? Decline to provide adequate protection for federal property or, and this is the other important one, federal government functions. Federal action, including the use of federal military forces, is authorized. That's what we're going to talk about here. That is the crux of this whole thing. All right. That decline is extremely important under the present day circumstances. We just had Kansas governor sign a law, a state law saying that they will not enforce federal gun laws. Guess what? Under this new DOD instruction, if a local authority, governor or something like that, declines to enforce a federal law, and that's basically what that's saying there about the federal regulations or federal officers carrying out their function, they can bring the military in. Do you see that? Texas wanting their gold back. They don't get it, so they go off onto some system of their own. Same thing. Freedom of speech, of the press, any of these things that the local people will not support. Under this directive, under this instruction, any decline by local or state authorities to enforce federal law or its enforcement officers assisting them in doing whatever they're going to do, then that allows the military to unilaterally enter into the situation. Okay? What does it take to not get a presidential approval? You call on the phone, he doesn't answer. This thing should list down other people. There is a chain of command, okay? And they're negating it. They're making the president the dictator. Do you see that? And it goes right over to the military right away. No. And this is not an accident. This is deliberate. Now, again, you can argue these things in a legal sense in a court for a long time. But it's right there. It says, if local or state authorities decline, okay, that's an important point in all of this. What really got me on this was that I had just talked on a radio show, on Pete Santilli's show, about Dr. Steve Pachinik's idea that the military should perform a coup. And of course I was against that for the very reasons I've already stated, the fact that the military has to be under some civilian authority. They either stand down under their oath, they either stand down and don't do anything, okay, or they go to a civil authority of some type, a state governor or somebody like that. Okay, that's the way it's supposed to work. Under Steve Pachinik's plan, of course, it was just going to be a military coup and oust the president and whatever else and have military courts or whatever. And I was against that for obvious reasons. I don't want the military to go there. So I was really surprised that Dr. Pachinik presented this, but now I know why, because he already knew that this instruction was out. Okay? And it's unconstitutional. So I wanted to bring that up. That's really in the nutshell, real quick explanation of the real evil behind this thing. And don't kid yourself, they may actually use it. We have Northcom here that has been put together by combat-hardened troops to take on the American people. You have DHS armed to the teeth, who of course isn't a military authority, right? But they would certainly be there to assist in any of this if it ever came down. We're in trouble, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I say that this is a very, very dangerous time. We keep seeing things like this. Now, we've already talked about the DOJ and the IRS doing all these terrible things with intimidating people and using those agencies to go after people that don't agree with the government or specifically even just the politics of the president. regardless of who the president is, Bush, Obama, I don't care. This isn't a bipartisan argument I'm making here. This is about constitutional liberty, freedom, not going into enslavement. And unfortunately, we have people that are selling us out. I also got some other information today. I haven't verified it yet, so I'm not going to go there, but some other dangerous things could be going on right now. I'm a little surprised it'd be happening this soon. But don't forget that there was that Coast Guard standout in District 7. And there are people say, well, no, it wasn't an ordered stand down. It was just because of the sequester. Well, the end result is the same. The only thing that they're doing. And you can look it up. Those of you who want to know where to find this, go onto Google and type in Coast Guard District 7. And you'll find the information about them not doing anything but emergency rescues. Okay, so our whole Atlantic seaboard is basically wide open right now. And there's some other things that are happening. So I'm not going to jump to conclusions on some of this other information I have, but just keep your eyes and ears open, okay? I think this is a really dangerous time, as I said. Okay, catching up on a few other little things that have happened over the last few days. I think I'll do that real quick, and that way I won't have to worry about skipping something that I think is important. I want to go back to this Angelina Jolie thing because I know, people think that this was a courageous move by her. And I've already pointed out that, if you have a fear of getting a flat tire on a car, you don't remove your tires, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, we have had these genes in us for thousands of years. They're not really any different today than they were thousands of years ago, okay? And yet, it's only recently we've seen this explosion of cancer and other sicknesses. The cause isn't the gene. That's a predisposition to a certain set of factors or environmental influences or whatever. Why do we keep talking about the cure? No, it's the cause. And I've heard other commentators say the same thing. So really what this is about is maiming you for no reason. Okay? The medical industrial complex in its own way is as bad as the military industrial complex. As a matter of fact, they're really united right now. All you got to do is watch television, see all these prescriptions, that you're supposed to get to fix any problem. Hardly ever do they talk about real good way of taking care of yourself, eating the right foods or whatever. Why? Well, part of it was because you have all this GMO out there right now. You have all these contaminations, all these, fluoride in the water. They're spraying stuff in the chemtrails, barium and strontium and aluminum. All of this stuff is everywhere. And they're wondering why we're having this explosion in cancer. It's not the gene that's the problem. It's not the cause any more than a tire on a car, would be a problem because it's there, that it might go flat. Something has to happen to it. So there's these things that we're being exposed to, whether it's BPA or those things I mentioned in chemtrails or the genetic manipulation through GMO food or whatever other contaminants. The cause is what we should be looking for, not the result. We're not trying to cure something. If you have a problem, you try to find out what the problem is, and then you go after that. And they're totally backwards on this whole cancer research. I'm sorry, I'm not a doctor, but it's illogical the way that they proceed. I'm sorry, it just is. So I just wanted to bring that up. Let's not maim ourselves because we're afraid that something might go wrong. Okay? Eat right, do the right things, do the stuff that'll preempt it naturally without maiming yourself. And that's just a plea. Okay, those bodies of yours are, it's your individuality, it's your life. And to lose parts of it unnecessarily because you think you might have something happen, it just isn't a good reason. So that's probably not a good explanation, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from. Okay? All right. I have to bring up Adam Kokesh's arrest. A lot of people are saying that, he was arrested and then charged with a resisting arrest, but never told what he was arrested for. Now, I don't know. Okay, I've looked at some of the videos, and I don't really know what happened there. It could be, I don't want to say what they may have actually moved on him for. I frankly don't think that he did anything wrong to justify what they did. But they may have been going after it on something like, encouraging people to break the law. It's along those accomplice lines. So I don't really know. But then again, the free speech comes into effect. All I will say is this, that what I saw them do is wrong. These federal police officers in general, are going way overboard because somebody tells them to. They're not studying the Constitution and taking their oaths seriously, which is why I constantly bring up the importance of knowing your oath of office. And say you know your superiors if they give you an order that you think is unlawful. Okay? So at any rate, I'm really not sure what's going on there. Frankly, I think that just like what they've done to the AP reporters, just like they've done with the conservative organizations, with the IRS harassing them, they're now going to do it to people like Adam Kokesh and probably a lot of others. And I got to tell you something, folks, there's an old statement, and you've heard it before. We all either hang together or we hang separately. As a people, we can counter this. First in the information arguments, the debates going back and forth, waking people up. And then when it comes right down to it, we fire these people. Literally, fire them from their jobs. I won't go any further than that. Okay. A couple of other things I want to go on real quick. Benghazi, we're hearing a lot about these whistleblowers, Hicks, for instance, the guys that were over in Tripoli. What about the witnesses that survived the attack, that were actually there on the ground when it happened? Where are they? Why have we not heard from them? Something to consider. Another part of the cover-up. And I heard this today, and I should have known. Out in Utah, the Mormons have food supply. That's one of the things that they do. And they're encouraged to do that. It used to be that they were encouraged to have a 7-year supply. Now I think it's down a few months, maybe a few weeks even. The point is that they have their own farms, they grow their own food, and they had canneries where they could can their food, and then they use that for food storage and to give out to the people that can't afford to buy food for themselves. The government came to them several years ago, the church leaders, and said, through FEMA, we want to have an inventory of what your people have for food. So a lot of people gave this information about their food supply to the church, who then turned it over to the FEMA federal government people. And that's not the end. Listen to this. The federal government is now shutting down Mormon canneries so they cannot can their own food under some spurious regulations. They're shutting us down, ladies and gentlemen, even organizations as large as the Mormon Church. Okay? Just a word of warning to you, because this is not going to get any better. Okay, I think that's enough on this update for right now. I just wanted to get that out to you on the DOD 3025, let you know where that could be going. And so I hope that was a little instructive. I'll probably not delve into that again. I think that's pretty much self-evident how dangerous that is. DOD should be called on the carpet for it right now. They know who their civilian authorities are they're supposed to answer to, and they're just circumventing that the same way that they said, no, we don't need Congress's approval to wage war. We get that from NATO and the UN. We're in a lot of trouble.